This is Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production, your daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball, featuring interviews with special guests. Now here is your host, Mr. Steve Jones. Yo, that's all we get?
Yo. That would be Dick Girardi. Yo.
Yo.
He'll call up. Yo. Well, great to be with you. Here we are in the middle of July. By the way, it's a big anniversary day today.
It is a big anniversary today, but which anniversary are you talking about?
I'm talking about the first step by Neil Armstrong on the moon.
Oh, I was thinking about National Pennsylvania Day.
No, this may be a little bigger than that.
Just a tad.
Just a little bigger.
A moon-sized.
So I was 11 years old, stayed up late at night, watched it. This is 1969, so it's 54 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was captivating. Right? The entire world was watching, and that was 54 years ago today. So
my mother was almost 8 years old at that point in time.
Yes. So there you are. So big anniversary day. Now, let's get to the topic du jour, which of course is name, image, and likeness. So,
oh, what a fun topic!
Yeah, but we talked about Congress and Congress getting involved. Okay. Well, they are now moving through a process, and it's only a process of essentially what is going to be a athlete's Bill of Rights that they're putting through. Okay. So what would the athlete's Bill of Rights mean? Well, it's being put together by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, and Senator Jerry Moran, who's the Republican of the three, from Kansas. So I only mention that because you're trying to get to what would be a bipartisan feel on the bill. And so when you look at what they have put together for this, it is, I read through it, and I see a lot in here when it comes to the athletes, but not a lot in here about the schools. Because right now the schools are the ones that actually do need parameters as to how this is working, because what they're talking about with their bill does not alleviate the wild, wild west feeling that we're getting right now. And that is the issue that I have with this. I'm looking at it, it's like, and a lot of this stuff is already being done anyway. Okay? A lot of it's being done anyway. They're talking about how a trainer and the athlete should have the say over when an athlete comes back. No offense, over here in the back, that's already how it's being done. The coach has no say as to when an athlete gets back. They have a say as to, okay, the athlete is fine, but, and then you have to decide whether to play him. So here's what they're proposing. This is a discussion draft, which is perfect for a talk show. It's all discussion.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Athletes would be allowed to have representatives such as agents, and those representatives would need to be certified by the CAC, and that is the College Athletes Corporation. It's a central oversight entity that would set, administer, and enforce rules and standards to protect athletes who enter into endorsement contracts. See, again, there's nothing here about the schools. This does not put parameters on NIL. Schools would be prohibited from punishing athletes for receiving food, rent, medical expenses, insurance, tuition fees, books, and transportation from a third party. Okay. Schools would also be required to cover the athlete's aid until they graduate, even if they suffer a career-ending injury. That already happens.
Yeah. They're just kind of reiterating generic statements.
I mean, do you think Adam Talaferro was off scholarship? No. Okay, they have a category for that does not count against the 85 or in basketball against the 13. They already have a category for that. Athletes making more than $1,000 per year would need to disclose their endorsement contracts to a designated employee of the university, and recruits would need to provide copies of their current and expired name, image, and likeness deals to that same person before signing a national letter of intent. That way you at least know ahead of time what you're getting into. That's common sense. Those disclosures would not be made public, nor would be subject to the Freedom of Information Act requests. So, in other words, Jerry Valerio's nosy would he puts in for like 4 FOIA requests per week.
Mm-hmm.
I said, why? He says, I just want to know. An athlete who no longer participates in their sport while operating under an NIL contract of more than a year can rescind it without being held liable for breach of contract. Okay. Any athlete can declare for the draft. Now, this is an interesting one. Any athlete can declare for a draft and come back to school after going undrafted with notice within 7 days of the draft taking place, as long as he or she does not accept compensation from a league, team, or agent.
I think this is possibly the best rule they could have added in here, because this doesn't fully cover just NIL. It also covers things like the draft or healthcare and stuff. There's a few other items they check reform-wise. I like this. I like that idea, because there are a lot of players who go into the draft thinking they're real good, and they might stick it out through the draft, not sign with an agent, and then draft comes and goes. They don't get a contract. They can then come back. Let's say that Andrew Funk went to the draft, didn't get drafted, didn't get a contract with someone afterwards, and hadn't signed with an agent. He could have come back within 7 days of the draft wrapping up. I like that. I like the idea of that.
Coaches will have to be very careful about the recruiting part of it, because if I'm a basketball coach, I have to have a 13th spot open and keep it open if a guy goes undrafted and decides to come back. A football coach would have to keep spots maybe 82 through 85 open. Now, how do you fill that? Well, you can fill them with, for example, hey, you know what? Turned out those guys decide not to come back. I've got 4 deserving, quote, walk-ons. I can do that. But you still would have to keep spots open to do it, unless they expanded the number of scholarships. So that, from the team side of it, there is a management part of this that would have to take place when it comes to this. The only thing, a part of this that I'm a bit hesitant about is this. You made a decision. Well, decisions do have pros and cons to them. Do all decisions that, because you're an athlete, in other words, you decide to leave, go to a, big New York City radio station, big time talent such as yourself.
Of course.
Right? You're going to take over afternoons on WFAN. After a month, you don't like it. I want to come back here. Well, we filled your job. With a much lesser talent, of course.
Oh, yeah. You filled it in with a guy named, Steve Jones, I think, probably filled in for me.
Oh, God, that fraud.
Yeah.
Right. But you see what I mean.
Yeah, your point, it makes sense.
In the real world, you don't get do-overs. But because it's sports, you get a do-over?
I get the not wanting to give a do-over.
And again, I'm only bringing this up as a
counterpoint here.
Just as a counterpoint to it, as to what I see the difficulty in it. I have no problem with somebody not getting drafted and wanting to come back and keep playing. I got that, because I think going through the draft experience, for example, you can find out, especially in basketball, more so basketball than football, okay? Because the time of the year allows individual workouts, individual evaluation. Football's not like that. It's the fall semester's over. You've dedicated yourself to the spring semester. You're not in school for the most part. Right? Basketball, you're done with school. You go to the NBA Combine. Classes ended in April. You're in the Combine in May. You're doing individual workouts in May. You're okay. You're okay. Football's a little different because of the calendar.
Yeah, for football, for the calendar, a lot of other sports, their calendar is different. I mean, the only sport this really will affect will be basketball, where you might see a lot of guys, because as you said, guys go into the draft process thinking, oh, I'm going to end up being taken somewhere in the draft, maybe in the second round. And they go through that process. They get kind of these like half guarantees of like, oh, if you're there, we might try and take you at like 44. And you get to 44 and someone slid to them and they take them instead. And then all of a sudden you end up undrafted and they say, you know what? We don't need you anymore. We filled your slot. And then it's like, well, what do I do now? And then they go and play in, say, European country somewhere else.
Now, NFL prospects do not drop out of school. I mean, you look at the guys that went through the NFL draft this time for Penn State, Jair Brown. He got his degree because, you're still going to school. But you'd have to stay in school while going through the process. If you drop out of school to go through the process, I don't think you should be able to come back. You made the decision. But if you decide to stay in school and keep going to classes, okay, now that way you're keeping your eligibility alive. You're keeping your credits and your progress toward graduation alive. Yeah, I think that's got to be some caveat in there about that.
Maybe like you set kind of a deadline of like, okay, when it hits, say, draft day, if you...
I mean, because these guys are still going to class. For football guys are still going to class. They are. All right, so it's not like they drop, but some people just plain drop out.
Yeah. Like maybe you set a restriction on like the ton of a timeline of it. Like if you don't like take your name out of the draft by a certain date, like let's say by draft day your name is not out. After that draft day, the 7-day period afterwards, maybe you can't transfer. You have to go back to the same school. You have to like re-enroll. Maybe they kind of like enforce a rule of sorts like that, where it's like, okay, maybe something like that happens.
But it says here, athletes would be able to transfer one time and play right away at their second school, which is already an NCAA rule, but not law. Transfers would not be able to transfer during the season or in the 60 days leading up to a season, unless you're Northwestern. That's a mess.
It's getting worse by the day.
And we'll talk about that in a moment. A medical trust fund would be established that would cover out-of-pocket expenses for injuries and other long-term conditions resulting from athletes' participation in sports. Okay. When Will Anderson and Bryce Young played in the Sugar Bowl against Kansas State, the university took out a lot of insurance on them.
They had to.
Right? They played. It was really great for the sport that they played. It was great for the university that they played. And let's give credit to the culture down there. It was great for the culture that they played. But the university made it happen because they took out a lot of insurance on them, which was not inexpensive. State attorneys general could bring civil action if they believe a citizen has been harmed by a violation of the act. Okay.
Cool.
And the law would preempt state NIL laws and prohibit them from establishing laws related to NIL rights and anything that would prohibit an athlete's ability to transfer. So what the bill does is it establishes health and safety standards for conditions such as traumatic brain injuries, heat-related illnesses, and then there's other areas, sexual assault, interpersonal violence. Trainers, physical therapists, physicians have autonomous authority to determine medical management and return to play decisions. No offense, that's already happening.
I think it's just kind of reiterating this, putting it into law.
Right, but this is not the 1930s. Rub dirt on it, get back in there. Okay, it's not the 1930s. Okay? You know how many times I've had said to me, hey, how's he doing? Well, he has extremely unimpressive x-rays.
Quite a few.
Right? And the young person is not practicing because they don't think they're ready yet. Well, is the coach forcing him out there? No. Is the athletic trainer or the doctor forcing them out there? No. The person that is saying that they can't go out there is the athlete. So guess what's happening? Is the athlete practicing? No. Is the athlete rehabbing? Yes. Right? That already happens. Again, there's 3 people involved here in the decision for an athlete's return to play. And I'm around it, so I know what the standard happens to be. The 3 people that have the say are the doctor, the trainer, and the athlete. Who is not in that discussion? The coach. Now, you may have missed too much time and the coach can't play you. But,
yeah.
I mean, that already happens. Now, maybe I'm assuming too much at other schools, but I know how it works here. Right? I know how it works here. Schools would be required to report revenues and expenditures for each athletics program, the average number of hours college athletes spend on college athletic events, and academic outcomes and majors for college athletes. But that already happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
A lot of this already happens. A lot of this is kind of already there.
When I sit there and I tell everybody how much money Penn State made in football, okay, expenditures, revenues, and that, you know, off the top of my head, I think it's like $46 to $50 million in the black. Men's basketball, okay, approximately between $2.5 and $4 million in the black. Everything else is in the red. Men's ice hockey is the closest. I think there were 32,000 in the red. Everybody else is
red.
6 to 7 figures in the red every year. Okay? And all you have to do is go to the Department of Education website, Equity in Athletics. The numbers are all there because you have to report the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only ones you don't have to report the numbers are private schools.
And that's what I think this might be targeting.
Right.
Is the
Northwestern,
the timing of it is interesting based on Northwestern. That it feels like, okay, like it could just be coincidental, but having this come around the same time the Northwestern's having their issues, obviously not in the same ballpark of financial issues, it feels, like it could be a good thing.
Well, this is a college athlete's bill of rights. Okay, so that's what it is. But that doesn't address the NIL issues. Okay, now Moran from Kansas did propose a bill 2 years ago that also gave the NCAA the legal protection it was looking for against antitrust laws that challenge athlete compensation rules. It also addressed transfer rules, the ability for athletes to return to college after going undrafted in a professional sport. Moran put all that in. Right now, the Booker-Blumenthal bill is not going to garner a lot of Republican support, but they can negotiate this. And as Moran said, he said, no piece of legislation at this point that's going to pass remains identical to what it is today. It's just the way the system works.
That is correct.
Right. And everybody knows that. But I think the changes that could be made to my bill are the ones that are modest and reasonable, and they're the vein of what this legislation is. In other words, Moran has more of a balance in there that includes the athletes. Okay, the athletes, I agree with all the athlete protections. I completely, because they're the ones putting it out there. All right, they're the ones putting it out there. But the problem you have now is that in this field of competition economically, NIL is a wild west right now, and there's nothing in this bill that addresses that. Moran's bill at least has elements that addresses it. Now, can they combine the two?
And make it a super.
To make it one, and we'll see. But But at least they're talking about it. And so now the question is, what comes next? And, Charlie Baker's been up there as the head of the NCAA saying, hey, come on, I need some answers. Help us here. We can't do this ourselves. We'd like to do it. We'd like to propose some legislation, but we'll be sued. And like all the other cases, we'll lose. We are good.
NCAA.
We are good at losing. All right. So now let's get to our good friends at Northwestern.
Go Wildcats.
Well, this extends to go beyond Go Wildcats. This extends to the ACC. And you're saying, what the heck do the two have to do with one another? Well, it's when you connect all the dots, these lawsuits that they are proposing include Pat Fitzgerald by name, but also, because they go back a few years, include former athletic director Jim Phillips by name, and he is the ACC commissioner. And
this is getting a little serious. Not like it wasn't serious, but this is now you're hitting a really high bar with this.
All right, so this is what's going on now. All right, first of all, attorney Benjamin Crump, civil rights attorney, he's involved. And he has a tendency sometimes in press conferences to throw out a whole bunch of things, hoping like a couple stick. All right. But he's throwing out a lot when it comes to this. Okay. So, an unnamed Northwestern player is now suing school officials. And they said Wednesday they're going to file another lawsuit on behalf of a second player, and they've added Jim Phillips' name to it as a defendant. The lawyers also said they discovered more allegations of misconduct in the school's softball and volleyball programs, on top of the known allegations in the football, baseball, and cheerleading programs. So attorneys Patrick Salvi and Parker Stenar held a news conference in Chicago on Wednesday, this morning, to discuss, or yesterday morning, I should say, to discuss the cases. And Ben Crump then had one an hour later. Stenar said, it's not just one coach, it's an athletic department, possibly a president, that allowed this to go on for years and failed to take appropriate action to protect the young individuals from traumatic events in their life. Okay, they brought to light more specifics through the school's releases and the reporting by the Daily Northwestern. Stenar added that their clients have told them football coaches did have knowledge of hazing incidents within the school. Now the internal investigation said no.
Well, this is where
you're what's the line here?
Yeah, and one of the players, former Northwestern players, commented on this. Lloyd Yates, a quarterback for a couple years at NU, said, I find it hard to believe that coaches were not aware of what was taking place. A lot of coaches took part in it in many different manners, and the explicit behavior was so explicit, it was loud. It took place in close proximity to where a lot of the staff, trainers were located. It's kind of hard to take a blind eye.
And obviously, as somebody who's been on that campus, who knows how many times now, 40, 50 times I've been on that campus. Mm-hmm. Everything in that athletic area is all in one small area.
It's all there.
Okay. Now, today it's a little more spread out because now the new Northwestern football indoor practice facility is down by the lake. Right? Well, that's not where it was before. Okay. And the football building and the weight room was right across from where the basketball arena was. I walked past it all the time. So in terms of the proximity, everything is, at least for years and the years they're discussing, close together. This is the years they're discussing. It's not the current setup. All right? Salvi said it seems to have been swept under the rug when it comes to the volleyball situation. We know from discussions we've had with people that have come forward that about programs in the softball program Then there's the baseball program. We haven't spoken with anybody in the program, but Coach Foster was fired for creating a toxic culture. Yet again, the details are not being released. That also speaks volumes. Northwestern spokesperson, who of course has nothing to do with what's going on, does not comment on pending litigation. What's that person supposed to say? I mean, you're like going, oh, great. What am I going to say about this? So, we all know that Pat Fitzgerald's been fired. Now, he's filed a
lawsuit against Northwestern.
He's in the process of doing it. He's hired attorneys. Salvi and Stenar demanded the school release the full 6-month investigation into football hazing. And so they wanted to look into the relationship between Northwestern and the Errant Fox Schiff law firm that conducted the investigation. It all made clear that legal action against Northwestern is only just beginning. Stenar said facts are coming out at a very fast pace, and we're learning about the widespread and institutional problems that exist within Northwestern. Now, what's happening is that, it's coming out fast and furious right now for this reason. People that may have felt like, hey, I don't want to say anything. Now this breaks and it's coming out, and they're slowly but surely saying, you know what? I think I finally feel comfortable enough to say something, strengthen numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening here.
It always just takes one person to be that person to be like, this is happening. And then,
you know what really helps is after the second person comes out. Instead of a person, when a second person comes out, I think that then opens the door for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 to then come out. Because now, instead of one, you're still not quite comfortable. But if a second one comes out, now you start to feel more comfortable.
You're not alone. It wasn't just a 2 off. It was.
It's right. Oh, there's more than just, I'm glad you said something. There's more than just. So this is, they already have a major problem there to begin with. And this is something that right away they're going to have to go through all of this and take care of it. They're going to have to settle as many of these as possible. I mean, there are going to have to be settlements here because if they go to trial, it'll linger, and you have to clean up everything.
There's going to be a lot of firings.
Now, remember that the
change.
university president has not been on the job there that long, so the university president is not going to be on the line of you have to go, because what are you responsible for? You're only responsible for finding out. And you suspended Pat Fitzgerald based on the report for 2 weeks, and then finally you fired him. The athletic director is in a little different ballgame here. Been there longer. Been there as long as Jim Phillips has been on the job in the ACC. Right? So it's been years. So that's one that becomes interesting. Are all the other programs clean? You now have to go through and make sure, like, all of them.
Yeah, because you now know at least 5 of them are not.
Right.
At least, bare minimum.
So you have to go through all of them. Women's basketball, men's basketball, Chris Collins. I mean,
lacrosse. Like, you're hitting everything.
Right. Every single sport. And you may go through and find out and get the good news like, hey, everything's fine here, no problem. As I said to you the other day, I don't get what good comes out of hazing. I don't understand it. I never have. It does it build camaraderie? No. What it does is it sows the seeds of things that you remember the rest of your life, and it's not good. But now you suddenly feel better. You're on the other side. You're hazing somebody else. That's supposed to now, I'm now on the other side. I already went through it. Now I'm going to make somebody else go through it. No. It doesn't do anything for the culture. It doesn't do anything for the locker room. It doesn't do anything for performance. It doesn't do anything for trust. It doesn't do any of those things. I'm trying to build camaraderie, a culture, a locker room, trust, right? I'm trying to build that. This doesn't do that. This creates a chasm between somebody entering the program and somebody that's already in the program. And it's not good. And the fact that this was allowed to go on evidently for years, and by the way, when it comes to people not knowing, right, it's hard to keep a lot of people quiet. You're talking about 18, 19-year-olds. And you're walking around, you hear something because you're around the program every day. So that's where this stands right now. Phillips, by the way, was the AD from 2008 to 2021. Both lawsuits listed the school itself, President Michael Schill, who's barely been on the job, former President Morton Shapiro, who was on the job, the Board of Trustees, the current athletic director Derek Gregg, and former football coach Pat Fitzgerald as defendants. Okay? So that's where that stands. Okay. Now for something that comes up about coaching that's important. It's the amount of time that you have now spent on the calendar where you're working 7-day weeks. At one point, it used to be 33 7-day weeks that coaches are working. They're up to 44 now. Right? And that's, I'm sorry, that's not healthy or conducive to a life. And I know, let's go back to the NCAA tournament. Now, remember I was talking about the coaches' convention?
Mm-hmm.
And coaches would go down, they'd spend the weekend at the coaches' convention. Yeah, they go to the meetings and so forth. And then after that, hey, look, there's some get-togethers, there's some, everybody gets to kind of just have a little bit of fun, kick their feet back. They probably won't go to the game, right? But now coaches are going down to the coaches' convention, and they're staying for a day, and they're coming right back. Why? Because they're worried about the transfer portal, and they have to make sure they're around their team, and they're concerned about recruiting and so forth. But that's the way it is now in the profession. You've gone from 33 7-day weeks to 44 of them. It's too much. And they keep reworking the calendar. Well, they got to rework it in such a way where it's beneficial for somebody who wants to coach to enjoy being in the profession a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Like, let's say, just number-wise, for example, you, Steve, only work 5 days a week. You work 5 days a week the entirety of the year. It's 260 days, give or take. If you work 44 straight 7-day weeks, you're working almost 310 days a year. That means you're working 50 more than the average human being is.
Right.
If you work 5 days a week.
Right.
That's crazy.
No, it doesn't make, because Nick Saban was talking about this yesterday. Now the month of May is a month where all the coaches are out on the trail recruiting, but the head coach can't be.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still in the office. Right? But the number of weeks, you're down to 8 weeks where you're not working 7-day weeks. Really? Jerry Valeri works 7 days in a month.
Ouch.
Oh.
It is getting
I just do that just because
I
know Jerry listens.
But it's getting to a point of being a little bit it's as you said, it's getting psychotic now. There is yes, coaches should be in tune with everything going on.
Yeah.
But telling coaches to work basically for 10 months of the year straight is not only wildly unhealthy,
right,
but it is terrible for anyone to do. Like, these people are people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They need to have lives.
They have children.
They have children. They have wives. They have family. Right? They have cousins or friends or mothers or children.
Or they may, or, it's every sport. They have husbands. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, you have to be able to do something.
They have pets. They can't take care of their pets because they don't have time to.
Yeah, so you got to be able to, there's got to be some sort of, everything we're seeing today is about the athlete, the athlete, the athlete, the athlete. I got it. Okay? The pendulum has dramatically swung here. Right? But there's got to be somebody that's sitting there saying, hey, look, how about a little work-life balance here? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you sit there and back off what you're doing. It's your choice. But the calendar has to be in such a way where instead of working 44 7-day weeks, you at least get it back to 33.
Bring the number down at least a little bit.
In college football, for example, you play 12 games. 12. You're not playing 260. Mm-hmm. You play 12. You need 44 7-day weeks to play 12? Now, of course, obviously, we're talking about recruiting. Mm-hmm. But there's got to be a better balance put in there in the calendar for all this. And how you do it, I don't know. The problem is you've always have somebody else breaking the rules. I just thought I'd bring that up. The World Cup, your World Cup is underway in New Zealand.
That it is.
The United States will play Vietnam tomorrow. And the United States, I think England would be the biggest threat, right?
In the group or in general?
In general.
In general, I would probably say the biggest threat would have to be, technically one of the host countries, Australia.
Yeah.
Australia, they're currently their best player. Sam Kerr is out for the first couple matches, but they won without her handily against Republic of Ireland 1-0. They are a strong threat. There's a few teams where I'm very intrigued to see exactly what this is. I believe the betting favorites it's US, England, Germany, Spain, France, Australia, New Zealand. New Zealand's 15,000, my bad. So they're not there, but England should be the biggest threat, but I'd probably put it Australia because the host country always gets a boost from playing in its home country. It's just how it works. Home fans around you, they set a record, I believe, in the country. I think it was 75,000 fans in the stadium for their opening match, which is a lot of people. That is a lot of people in any stadium.
Yep.
So they did that, and the U.S., I think we're sitting in a good location. We have Vietnam, Netherlands, and Portugal in our group. The Netherlands are good, but they're missing one of their best players.
Yep.
So the U.S. should get out of the group pretty easily and handily, but it's going to end up coming down to just what we draw in the, the knockout stages. Right. That's what always comes down to every World Cup, but this year, if you can avoid Australia and England for as long as possible, you want to.
Sure. All right. The United States is a favorite. And remember, the United States is coming off a bronze medal performance in the Olympics. They were not helped at all in the Olympics by several factors. Number one, which everybody had to go through, but how Tokyo was set up because of the pandemic made it just impossible to have any kind of feel, camaraderie, sense of, of how everybody around you plays. And then Alyssa Nair, Penn State's Alyssa Nair, got hurt in goal. When she got hurt, it changed everything for the U.S. because she was having a spectacular Olympics. And in fact, I talked to Alyssa, had her on the show, about 6 weeks after, her knee was healing at that point. Well, she's going to be back in goal this time for the U.S., and it's going to make a big difference for them, having her back there. There's a confidence with her in there that makes a big difference. And then, of course, Morgan, and this is the last one for Megan Rapinoe.
Mm-hmm. She's retiring from essentially all footballing after this. She's retiring from the women's national team, and after the NWSL season, she's done.
Yeah.
So.
She's 38 now?
38. Rapinoe, Morgan, and Kelly O'Hara, I believe, have all played in the last 3 straight World Cups.
Yeah. And it sounds like they're going to an area that's really supporting it, which is great. They haven't always had that. I mean, they went to Canada. They supported it, but Canada was the only one that bid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when they were complaining about we're playing on AstroTurf fields and, or field turf fields, which is what all they have in Canada now. I mean, because they were playing in CFL stadiums. And they said, it was Abby Wambach that was complaining, saying, the men play on grass, and this is disrespectful. And they finally pulled her aside, and they said, Abby, they're the only ones that bid.
Yeah.
I think you ought to be nicer to them about this. It's like, yeah, okay.
Steve,
now this time there's more bidding, which helps.
There is. And after doing a little bit of manipulation in terms of brackets and all of that fun jazz, I don't believe the U.S. women's national team would have to face a top opponent, I don't believe, until the finals. Unless my bracketology is wrong,
right,
based on the groups and where everyone is placed, I don't believe they would need to face an England until late.
Yeah.
Just based on how it shakes out, assuming they win their group at least. If they don't win their group, this gets a lot more complicated.
Sure.
But if the U.S. wins their group, they would coast through. They'd have the runners-up of a group that is Then all of a sudden you get the next matchup and you go on from there to there. You'd probably have a semifinal match maybe against someone crazy. But if you can get through to the semifinals without anything scary, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And this year, by the way, the first year of the 32-team Women World Cup, there are 8 new countries that have never been in the World Cup before, including New Zealand, who are now have their first matches played, which I think is amazing. That I know a lot of people have been discussing the World Cup's expansion and how it's working. I think it's only a good thing because there are a lot of countries that never get to experience going to the World Cup.
Well, first of all, it's the world game.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to really develop the world game in the world is to open the door to more competition. So let's take the Dream Team in 1992. They went out and they played Algeria in the first game, and the U.S. won by 5,620 points. Barkley had 100. No. Would they won by 60 points?
Something like that. They won without trying.
But it wasn't just that what the U.S. did. What do you think it did for Algeria and for Algerian basketball? That they stepped on the same floor as Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, John Stockton. You go through the line. David Robinson. All the people that played. Clyde Drexler. That played on that team. What do you think it did for the country and interest in basketball in that country that they stepped on the same floor with those people? It did so much for them. And the same thing here with World Cup expansion. What's it going to do for all these countries that they are able to step on the same pitch as the United States? And maybe the United States is 3 goals better than they are, maybe 4 or 5. But just by walking out there, right, they can hold their heads high and say, you know what? Okay? And you know what? We're going to get better. We're going to get better. Next time we go to this thing in 4 years, we're going to get better. Because there's going to be more interest in the country because they did it. And the entire country will be watching them play that match with the United States. What do you think this does for Vietnam?
It's huge.
Vietnam's going to play them tomorrow. Vietnam's part of this expansion. All right? I don't recall Vietnam ever being in the World Cup before.
I don't believe they have been.
Right? What do you think it does for Vietnam? They're going to step on the same pitch with the United States. It's going to do so much psychologically, even if they get run out of the stadium. They're going to walk out there and go, you know what? Hey, look what we just did. We played against the U.S., and we had some moments.
Mm-hmm.
Not that many, but we had some moments. And it's going to do a lot to get young people to then want to play soccer in Vietnam, which then in turn will get more young people to play, and then get more young people to play, and then they're going to get older. And that's what you want to see. You want to see young people get involved in various activities. So we'll keep this to sports as being a sports show. But by being involved in sports, right, they can get the benefits of being in the sport, the camaraderie of it, the ability to play, the discipline of it, the fun of it, instead of doing something else. Instead of doing something else. Because you can be drawn into that something else with relative ease. Now I've got young people wanting to play basketball, young people wanting to play soccer. Well, you know, or if, you know, again, it's it could be a dance company, it could be
but it's good. It's good for
whatever.
Yes,
yeah, like I said, you want to be in the band, you want to be in a dance company, whatever. Same thing. There's no difference. All right, so I'm not. But this is a sports show, so we concentrate on that.
Yeah, and let's say, for example, that a Vietnam does beat the U.S. in a match. Like, but if it happens,
what is wrong with you?
I know, I'm not. But let's say they beat let's say.
Are you feverish?
Let's say South Africa beats England.
Hey, look, one day. And on one day, you could have the day of your life. I mean,
and that's the thing that it could only help because when you see that happen, you see that David Goliath matchup and David wins. Like, look at, for example, the Men's World Cup from 2022. Morocco, a team that should not have been there, ended up in the semifinal round against France. They beat Spain with one of the best teams in the World Cup, and Portugal with Ronaldo level players. Like, they beat a crazy two teams to get to where they were.
Sure.
What do you think that did for Moroccan soccer going forward?
Of course.
As you said, more signups, more people, and it gives the country something to look back on, look with joy.
Yeah.
As a sports fan, some teams don't have the most luck. As a Saints fan, I've had one Super Bowl in my lifetime. I can remember most of that Super Bowl, watching it completely. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee you most Moroccans can remember exactly what they were doing watching their penalty shootout against Spain. They can remember exactly who took what penalty, what it looked like. Because it's just one of those things.
But was there an onside kick?
There's something about it that truly seeing more teams is good. And I believe the World Cup in 2026, if I'm not mistaken, is going to have more teams. It's going to have, I believe, 48. So it's only going to get expanded on even more in terms of the number of matches, in terms of the number of teams that are there. Yes, it's going to take longer, but I don't have an issue with it. And anyone who always makes the argument of, oh my gosh, but it dilutes the teams and you're getting these terrible teams in there. But it doesn't matter. Where this is not like the best of the best. The best of the best happens in like the semifinal rounds. That's where I want to see these best teams at.
Sure, of course.
Like, I want to see them.
Like the NCAA basketball tournament's a perfect example. Okay, Cinderella is adorable until it becomes crunch time. Okay, right. Florida Gulf Coast. I was there in Philly covering it the night they beat Georgetown.
Dunk City.
Right? They beat Georgetown. Right? And, of course, the entire arena, except for one small section from D.C., was rooting for them. They then duplicated it and beat San Diego State, right, 2 days later. Well, the TV ratings were great. But then they got to the round of 16 where they lost. the TV ratings for that were in the tank because, again, there's only a shelf life. Okay? There's only a shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with this. Morocco's doing great. It's like, okay, yeah. After a couple rounds, like, okay, they can go bye-bye now.
Yeah. But that's...
I want to see Spain. I want to see Italy. I want to see Germany. I want to see the U.S.
I want to see Messi. And you got Messi in the finals. Right. You got the Argentina-France matchup everyone kind of wanted to happen. Sure. But it took them time. And I like that. I like the fact that we're going to get more teams here, that we're going to be able to see the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, of course, because we're all host nations, so we're all in automatically. But that means that from the CONCACAF, from our group, there's going to be some teams in there that probably have not played before. Jamaica's going to get in, but there's going to be some other countries that may not have ever played in the World Cup or have not in a very long time.
Right.
And to see those countries get in is truly a very fun thing to see, because as we're seeing in this Women's World Cup, when a lot of teams in countries that have never gotten in get in, it means the world to them. It means the world to their people. And they're like, soccer is like, yeah, the U.S., we have a weird view on it because soccer is not our biggest sport, but most other countries, it is your biggest sport. So the World Cup is like a national event.
Let me point out something about our soccer program. Right. It may not be the biggest sport in this country, but we are a country of 335 million people. We can find 24 that can play.
Yeah. Our women's team, of course, is the best in the world for a reason.
Yes.
But
they got ahead of the game. See, the difference is the U.S. was always behind starting in 1930. In women's soccer, the U.S. was always in front and has stayed in front. Right? That's a big difference. Right? Who's serious about it first? Well,
we were there.
Right? And the U.S. in women's soccer was serious about it right away. In men's soccer, wasn't as serious about it for decades and fell behind the rest of the world. Okay. The Athletic, by the way, has put out an article, How a Hazing Culture Evolved at Northwestern's Camp Kenosha. There's a significance to ritual. Yikes. They talk about in the more than 100 players would file into the wrestling room at Camp Kenosha up in Wisconsin, find their chair, open their equipment bag, and begin to change. As they did, often a chant would start up: naked pull-ups, clap, 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 naked pull-ups, clap, clap, clap. This was not an encrypted code. Someone would be chosen to approach a bar unclothed and do pull-ups in front of the group in the name of team bonding. As one Northwestern player said, "Can you say no? You can for sure." He says, "But where does that leave you when you do?" They spoke to 21 individuals. 14 of them request anonymity. Okay? And they said that when Fitzgerald played, Gary Barnett was the coach at the time, Fitzgerald's teammates spoke openly and said, no. He says, it didn't happen. He says, and he said, but it did grow increasingly toxic across subsequent coaching tenures, and no one is in a position of authority seemed to be inspired to stop it. They said they did things like, fight songs and things like that you had to do. I mean, just benign stuff. So, but as it kept going, this one player, who was a freshman in the 2010s, said, quote, "I knew this day would come. If someone were to run an investigation on us, we would be, quote, effed."
Yep. That's all you need to really say.
Yep.
It is not good.
And this does outline a lot of things I'm not going to talk about on the air, because that's just not my nature to do that. You can just assume it's not good. You can read the article yourself on The Athletic. And they said that Fitzgerald's former teammates say they were generally surprised by the reports of hazing at the school. They don't recall any forced activities or simulated sex acts occurring during their time at Northwestern. But the freshmen from 96 see a potential starting point in the evolution. Yikes. This is a very detailed article. And again, 21 people interviewed, 14 requested anonymity. Now remember, Rashidi Wheeler, right, was among dozens in attendance for a Northwestern preseason conditioning test on campus. And during the sprints, he collapsed. They administered CPR, but they couldn't revive Wheeler. Now, this happened just 2 years ago, okay? 22 years of age. If you want to see what the movie, it was ESPN put the movie out, The Junction Boys. Watch that. It is Bear Bryant going to Texas A&M, I believe from Kentucky, and the 10-day training camp he put his team through to find out who were the quitters and who were the stayers. It's brutal. It's brutal. And you watch it like, look, when I met and interviewed Bear Bryant, at that point, he was like Grandpa. Okay? Hey, son, nice to meet you. Right? And I watched the movie, and you're like, holy man. Now, you obviously will take poetic license when you're putting a movie together, but in general,
the gist of it is yeah, true.
And
the scariest part of this Northwestern thing is that the details we know now, it's only the tip of the iceberg.
No, it wasn't hazing. It wasn't hazing involved in that. It was.
But like those stuff like that, Northwestern, like it's the tip of the iceberg. This is only going to get more detailed and more heart-wrenching to read what has gone on in the program. But when we know more details, of course, we might discuss them here on Sports Talk with Steve Jones tomorrow.
Yes.
And of course, thank you for tuning in to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a Seven Mountains Media production.
Wow.
Check back daily for all the latest sports news and analysis. The voice of Penn State football and men's basketball, Mr. Steve Jones.